Good morning. Welcome to Browncroft. Great to have you with us this morning. Kids, great to have you with us as well. For those of you who were with us throughout the month of June, we were in a series called Jesus Culture. And for the most part, that series was about us and how we as a family of faith form a culture that will be countercultural for the world and how that can influence the world. This month, we're kind of reorienting ourselves a little bit. You just saw the bumper video there for our series now called God's Space. And if I had to define that in one kind of sentence, it would be, what are we doing as the family of faith to reach the people around us? What does that look like for us? And here at Browncroft, we say all the time, we're about inviting people into a life-changing relationship with Jesus, right? That's what we want to be about. But in order to do that, we need to kind of define what that looks like, I think, for us. And so this whole month, that's what we're going to be doing. And we're basing it out of this little book called God's Space. So creating God's Space and this book, God's Space. It's weird how they are so closely aligned. And this book has formed a lot of our thoughts on this. If you're with your small group, you want to kind of go deeper into this material, I would highly suggest this book. It's several years old now, but very, very practical. So some of the things we're going to be talking about over the course of this month are listening. Turns out that's really important for us. Serving, rebuilding bridges. And this morning, I'm going to be kind of setting the stage for us with noticing. Noticing God at work around us and then joining him in the work he's already doing. But before I even get into that, let me ask a question, and I want you to actually consider this question, because sometimes, us preacher people, we can just throw out questions and then not really want you to think about them, but I want you to think about this question. When was a time in your life someone noticed you and you felt seen? Could be a long time ago, could be very recently. When was a time in your life where someone noticed you and you felt seen? And a follow-up to that would be, how did that make you feel? Sit in that for a second. How did that make you feel? I'm going to play a fun game here just because, it's 4th of July week and I can have fun. So I'm going to do it. How about the answer to that question? A couple people, just shout out, how did it make you feel to be noticed and seen? Fantastic. I like it, Benny. All right. What's that? Amazing? Good. I like that. That's a good word, too. What else? What's that? Okay. All right. I don't know, but we're going to go with it. Appreciated. Happy. Yes, I love it. It's a lot of positive emotions, right? We got a lot of positive feelings when we're seen and we're understood. And I think that's important for us to remember. I would say even, dare I say, loved, when I think about those times in my life where I felt seen and noticed. I felt loved. But this is countercultural. This is not the norm in our society right now. And more, we need to learn how to live this way, because the culture around us is not doing this well at all. So we as a family of faith have to determine, how are we going to live this out in our lives? Speaking of this, Julie Damdar, one of fellow Browncrofter, caught me out in the hallway a few weeks ago and showed me this book. It's by columnist David Brooks. And it's a new book called How to Know a Person. And she said, John, this is so you. You got to read this book. And in that moment, I felt seen and loved and known. So that was beautiful too. But I want to share a few of the insights from this book because I just got finished reading it this week. And there's a chapter in this book called The Epidemic of Blindness, which is really about where our culture is at right now. And there's so many studies that have been compiled in this, some of them dating back to like 2015, 14, some of them really recent. But let me just read a few of these things to you, and you're going to see them up on the screen as well. I want you to take these things in. So Americans who say they have no friends has quadrupled between 1990 and 2020. No friends at all has quadrupled in that amount of time. 36% of Americans reported they felt lonely frequently or almost all the time, including 61% of young adults and 51% of young mothers. Think about that. What does that mean to have that many people saying, I feel lonely all the time? Here's something interesting. 2 generations ago, 60% of Americans said most people can be trusted. By 2014, which is when this study was done, that number had dropped to 30.3%. Now, can you imagine what it would be if it was taken 10 years later? Most people can be trusted. I would say it's even lower. In 1966, 90% of college students at that time said the main goal of their education was to develop a meaningful philosophy of life. By 2015, 82% of college students said the main goal of education was financial success. That's a drastic shift. Drastic shift. And this is one of the most sobering statistics from a recent study that I saw. 54% of Americans said they have no one who knows them well. 54% of people say they have no one who knows them well. We live in a very individualistic society. We, just celebrated 4th of July. One of my favorite holidays, by the way. Love it. No other country I would pick to live in besides America. But that does not mean we don't have our downfalls and we don't have our shadow sides, right? And I think that independent streak that we all have, that sense of I can do this on my own, can be our downfall if we're not careful. And so we as a church have to find a way to be a counterbalance in our society and to live in a different way. And that's what we will choose to focus on together. And when we do that, what people really need is the way of Jesus. They don't need just us, they need to see Jesus in the way that Jesus lived out his life. Because Jesus was not in a hurry in his life. Jesus was not, if you read the Gospels, he's not sprinting from one place to the next. It's easy for us to put our cultural lens on things and to think like, oh, Jesus just drove from one place to another and then just did his thing and then skated out of there. No, Jesus actually took his time. There's a Japanese theologian who wrote a book recently called The 3 Mile Per Hour God, in which he describes the way that God works as moving at the speed at which we as human beings walk. It's a fascinating idea, and I think really, really wise. And so we're going to look at a passage this morning where Jesus does just this. Matthew 9, 35 to 38. Matthew 9, 35 to 38. And we're going to read it all in the beginning, and then I'll break it down for us as we go on. Starts off this way. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." I love this picture of Jesus because I think it gets to the heart of what we're talking about here and what we need as individuals, as people, and what we can contribute to the people around us. When you look at verse 35, it's really important to notice Jesus is meeting the practical needs of the people where they're at. It says this: Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. So what Jesus is doing there, imagine you're a person back in that culture in that day. They didn't have constant information that you and I have today. They went around with a lot of questions about who is this God? How can we really get to know him, to follow him? And Jesus is hitting them where they're at there. But then he's also healing them. Like, they didn't have hospitals like we have hospitals today, and he's meeting their needs right where they're at. And those are beautiful things. Like, as a church, I am so grateful that as a church we do those things, like that we tell people the word of God. It's amazing to be part of a faithful church that wants to proclaim who Jesus is to people around them. That is amazing. So that's beautiful. Meeting needs. Browncroft is so amazing at meeting needs too. Like right now, if I were to say, hey, we need to raise a bunch of money for a missions project across the world, you know what Browncroft would do? Boom. You guys would meet the need. You would meet the need. In the beginning of the school year, when we say we want to have a bunch of backpacks, for kids in the city schools. You know what happens? You guys fill the whole thing with backpacks. The whole lobby area out there is full of backpacks. That is beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. But in the midst of teaching, in the midst of meeting people's physical needs, I'm afraid that we might need training in one other area, and that's the relational needs of the people around us. Because that's where people are hurting right now more and more. They need people to come alongside them in relationships. So here's my main point. And you guys know I like one main point. So here it is, okay? So if it isn't good, I'm sorry. But here's my main point for the day. The greatest gift we can give someone is our attention. The greatest gift we can give someone is our attention. Now you go, wow, John, back that up. Let me back it up by the passage itself. Verse 36. This is the centerpiece of this whole passage. It says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. When he saw the crowds. That doesn't mean just like looked at or glanced at the crowds. To actually see the crowds from this passage actually means to stare into. So it's like he is looking, he is locked on the crowds. He's staring them in the eyes, and he's seeing exactly what they need. It's that uncomfortable, like, whoa, you're looking at me too long right now. You're looking into my soul kind of look that he's doing, and he's seeing exactly what the crowds need. He sees the crowds. He knows the true condition of the people around him. That's what we need to take the time to do, is to stare at the people around us. Not freaky stare. That would be weird. But to look intently to the people around us. My son and I have been playing this. I don't know if it's a game. It's something that we're doing this year. He came up with this idea all on his own, and so I was like, okay, sure, let's do this. So we both like music, so we have this music thing in common, and he said to me, hey, I would like to send you an album on Spotify and have you listen to it. And then I want you to send me an album on Spotify and I'll listen to it. And then we'll give each other reviews of our albums that we give each other. And so and then eventually we came up with rules where we have to actually listen to it 3 times through. So you actually have to listen to the whole thing 3 times through. So no instant judgment. This is a judgment-free zone. And then you have to give yourself the top 3 songs off of it, and then the least favorite song off of it. And it's a battle, right? Because like I'm like I don't want to listen to that one. I don't want to, but out of love I do, and ultimately we both end up learning so much from each other from this experience. It takes time. It takes a lot of time to listen through an album 3 times and then to give a review at the end of it. And sometimes it takes us weeks, but it's a really fun exercise. And I'm so glad he suggested it. And this last album that he gave me was kind of along reminded me about this staring idea. And the one song, the top song that I picked out of it, was this young guy is trying to understand like his own transformation. He deeply wants transformation in life, and he's going about his life. And as he's going about his life, he sees this homeless man, and this homeless man asks him for $1, and the young man in the middle of it is like, nah, I don't want to give him $1. And the homeless man is staring at him. And the guy is like, I don't want to give you $1. And the homeless man just keeps on staring at him. And it just pierces his soul, this young guy's soul. And he eventually is in this lockdown, stare down with this old man. And he says, you know what? No. And he walks away, and he's confronted by his own selfishness in the midst of it all. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, I just learned something from the song that my son gave me. This is amazing. And it was this real bonding and also an understanding of, I think, what Jesus is calling us to in a couple of different ways in that. Because the greatest gift we can give someone is our attention. You'll notice in this passage that Jesus sees the people as harassed and helpless, right? Harassed. Just constantly under bombardment. If someone just pokes you in the arm once, you're like, that's annoying. But if they keep on poking you, that's really annoying. That's like harassment, like stop it, right? But in our society, think about what we're harassed by day after day after day. Think about the lives of people around us if we take an opportunity to think about it. How about a constant onslaught of information coming at us in ways that we never appreciated before? Opinions. Oh my goodness. Do you want an opinion? Just go on Facebook or YouTube or whatever your favorite social media platform is. You'll get an opinion. And negativity, right? Harassed by negativity, because what rises to the surface on every platform? It's always the negative, the negative, the negative. People are harassed, helpless. Everybody has a platform now, so nobody's got a platform. People feel like I don't have a voice in this world anymore, and even if I did, I don't know what I would say. People are alone. It reminds me of the parable of the Good Samaritan, one of Jesus' most famous parables. When the religious leaders of Jesus' day go to him and say, hey, Jesus, just so we get this clear, we're doing pretty good. Who's my neighbor and all of that? I just want to make sure we got this straight. And Jesus says, oh, let me tell you a little story. And you got this guy, part of their community, who's on the side of the road. And you have religious leaders. We're going to pick on some religious people because I'm one of them. So let's pick a pastor, okay, in context. And there's this person on the side of the road. And then the pastor walks by and just glances over, but then is glued to the phone and just keeps on going, right? And Jesus says, or there's this seminary professor that goes by. He's got his doctorate in theological studies. And he's walking by and he's like, oh, that guy. And he just continues to walk. And Jesus says, but the most unusual person, the person who you would never think should stop by the side of the road, stops by the side of the road. The Samaritan, the worst of the worst. In this culture, so divided. I mean, our culture is divided right now, right? This culture, extremely divided, a lot of similarities. Imagine the person you would least expect. I don't know what your vantage point is here, but the person you think shouldn't stop, stops. And they help this man on the side of the road. And Jesus says, that is your neighbor. Whoa, holy cow. That dramatically changes the narrative. That changes everything if we live that way. But in order to do that, you have to pay attention. You have to see that person on the side of the road. And the greatest gift you can give someone is your attention. Jesus ends the passage with a familiar couple of verses here, verses 37 and 38. And they're ones that sometimes we hear in if you've been around churchy circles, missions conferences or things like that. Sometimes these verses are quoted in. But I think it's important to reread them, 37 and 38, because in context it makes a lot more sense. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Jesus says, look, there's so many hurting people around. Open your eyes. Ask God to send out people to meet these people where they're at. And what is he not saying? He's not saying raise up a bunch of pastors. They're great. Pastors are great. He's not necessarily saying send out about a bunch of missionaries, although that's fantastic when we can commission Lori this morning. Oh, that's so beautiful. I have a vision for this church. Let's send out more and more missionaries from this church. But that's not exactly it either. He's saying everyone, my followers, should be these people who are viewing the world as their harvest field. Everybody in the seats here this morning or tuning in online, you are part of that force that Jesus is asking to be awakened. And we should be praying that we would be that kind of force in the world. Because the greatest gift we can give people is our attention. And I was thinking about this, and I get inspiration from unique places in my life. And sometimes it's from places that I don't expect, and maybe I should expect it more. But I think about what I've seen God do in the life of my daughter. That was recently when I was thinking about this passage that's came to mind. One of her friends was at school, and she'd talked to for a while, and they had some sort of spiritual. I don't know how all this stuff works these days. All I know is students seem to be open with talking about what they believe and stuff, and that's really great. That's awesome. I think that's fantastic. Somehow they had a spiritual conversation where they were sharing what background they were from, and her friend said, I've always thought I'm agnostic. Now she's in 11th grade, so I don't know if she knows what agnostic means, but that's what she was picking out, was that she was agnostic. And I thought, well, that's cool. And so my daughter just kept on kind of talking with her, but she noticed several months ago that this friend of hers had kind of started to act differently. And she started acting kind of depressed and more withdrawn. And she started asking, what's going on in your life? And she kept on just being there with her. And this friend of hers stopped kind of coming to school as regularly. And when she did come to school, it was pretty evident that she just wasn't like herself. And my daughter got into another conversation with her and said, you know, would you like to go to youth group with me sometime? And kind of like out of the blue, her friend was like, sure. And my daughter just said, great. So now I reviewed this story with my daughter ahead of time, okay? So just so you all know, because I didn't want to tell any misleading things. She was like, Dad, just make sure you tell them I didn't invite her to church, okay? I invited her to youth group. I'm like, okay, so I've done that. But the youth group environment is a little different, right? So she was able to invite her to this place where there's these two wonderful leaders, Cheryl and Courtney, who are pouring into these 11th grade women's lives. And the other thing that my daughter said that happened was these girls within the youth group, none of them judged her friend whatsoever. They just welcomed her in. They recognized she was hurting, and they were like, whatever you want, we're just here with you. And they provided a supportive, loving environment. And you know what? My friend's daughter my daughter's friend just kept on coming back and back for a few months, all in a row. And she's still on this journey, but she's still discovering who Jesus is. And when I think about it, I'm like, oh my goodness. What I can learn from a bunch of 11th grade girls. What our church can learn from a bunch of 11th grade girls. Because that's what Jesus is talking about. Noticing the people around us, noticing and respecting the fact that they're harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd, and then pointing them to a place where they can truly find hope and healing. But you can't do that if you don't take the time to stop and look and say, God, where are you at work? I love this quote by Henry Blackaby. The book Experiencing God is one of my favorite books, Christian books. It's just so practical. I'm just a practical guy. You got to give me the practical stuff. You can't give me this is just so practical. Here's what he says. If you could sum up the book in one sentence, this is what the book says. Watch to see where God is working and join him in his work. That's the secret to a happy Christian life, Henry Blackaby says. Watch to see where God is working, and then join him in his work. Sometimes we complicate this thing so much as Christians. We say, well, we got to somehow manufacture these conversations or somehow just have the exact right answer. But I think the principle is God is at work in the world around you. As Jesus said, the harvest is there. Look around. The harvest is there. Open your eyes and decide, hey, let's get out there and engage people where they're at. And let's look for where God is at work. Let's see people for who they really are. I thought it would be appropriate as we kind of close today to just pray a prayer together. We don't always do this, but it's something that I thought would be kind of an appropriate way to let this sink into our souls a little bit. And so I just have a 2-sentence prayer, okay? 2 sentences just to work through together. I'm going to read it first. And then if this is, God, I do want to pray this week. I want you to pray it the second time I read it through, okay? But I want you to sit with it and let it sink in for a minute first. Lord, help me to slow down to notice how you're at work around me. Give me the courage and compassion to join you in your work. All right. If you want to pray that prayer, we can just pray it out loud together. All right? Here we go. Lord, help me to slow down to notice how you are at work around me. Give me the courage and compassion to join you in your work. Amazing. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm going to send you all out. When I do that, Today is the first Sunday of the month, and so that means we have a mercy offering that we always do on the first Sunday of the month. If you want to contribute to that, that goes to people's needs within our community. And I also want to just reiterate what Kelly said before about Lori being here. And out in the hallway, Lori's going to be hanging out there. If you just want to stop by, write something in her book, give her a hug, give her some well wishes. We're all part of a big family here. That would be great for her to feel loved as she exits this place and into the new adventure in her life. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Hope you have a great week ahead. Take care.
In the darkness.